Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode, we are going to talk about the Death Domain Cleric. This is a subclass that comes from the Dungeon Master's Guide, so it's another one we're not supposed to have. But it's a very cool domain, it's a very cool concept, and I love the idea behind it, so I'm very excited to jump into this one. If you like what we do here, please like, share, subscribe, keep commenting. I love hearing what you guys say and some of the experiences you guys have had with playing these kinds of characters. It's awe-inspiring, some of the things you guys get to do. So without further ado, let's jump right into the Death Domain Cleric. As I said, the Death Domain Cleric comes to us from the Dungeon Master's Guide. It is a very cool concept. You are an emissary of a deity of death. Anything that raises the undead or uses them in their machinations is basically the entities you're going to try and follow. It is in the Dungeon Master's Guide because you can develop this into a big bad very, very easily. It kind of goes alongside with the Oathbreaker Paladin and sits perfectly well. If you want big three evil, it's easy to pick the Necromancy Wizard, the Death Domain Cleric, and the Oathbreaker Paladin. Congratulations, you ruined your Dungeon Master's life. It is a great, powerful class because the basis of the Cleric class is very, very strong, and it has a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of great concepts behind it. That being said, you get a great list of domain spells that basically fills up the necromancy spells that you don't have as a cleric, and that is going to become very, very important later on with some of the skills you get. As all clerics get when they gain a domain, they get bonus proficiencies. This one lands under martial weapons, so you do have training with all martial weapons when you are a Death Domain Cleric, which is going to become very, very important with the skills you get later on and how in order to incorporate them best to how a cleric works. At first level, you gain access to an ability called Reaper, which lets you learn one cantrip of your choice from any spell list that comes from the Necromancy school. Already, I like the themology behind it. There are 4 Necromancy cantrips currently. There is Toll of the Dead, Chill Touch, Spare the Dying, and Sapping Sting, which just came out in Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. Now, when you cast a Necromancy cantrip that normally targets only one creature, the spell can instead target 2 creatures within range of each other. That's 5 feet. Works for Spare the Dying. In case 2 people are down, you can save that valuable time and stabilize them both. It works for Sapping Sting, which is a Necromancy cantrip that makes the target make a Constitution save, otherwise they take a D4 necromantic damage and fall prone, which is important because it drops them. So you might be able to drop 2 people if they fail. Con saves aren't really the best, but it is something that has a caveat to it. If you like taking chances, it works. At some point, someone's going to fail. You definitely want to blow some of those high rolls on that, as opposed to them making a save on something like a disintegrate or whatever. Also, Chill Touch is great because, yeah, it's a longer range than Toll of the Dead because it's 120 feet, but it stops the target from being able to regain hit points until the start of your next turn. If you're fighting something that regains HP, that is a huge, huge bonus. I suggest taking it even if you don't intend to really be doing it. It's good to have a ranged option no matter what you're playing as. Toll of the Dead is great because it does a 1d8 necrotic damage normally, but if the target has already suffered damage, that's a 1d12, and it keeps raising as cantrips do per level, and I believe it's a wisdom save. All of these are great, but all of them initially target one person. So yeah, you get a little bit of play because you can be this great stopper of death with being able to cast Spare the Dying to 2 people at once, and it saves that kind of cleric-y, maybe you're a good death cleric and maybe you follow death deities that aren't as evil as traditionally they could be, or you're like me, in which case you're definitely going to get Toll of the Dead already as your ranged option, but you're going to pick up Chill Touch for those rare occasions, and you're going to love casting it and hitting multiple people, especially early on. This is huge. It gives you the ability to make an attack roll and do damage to 2 creatures. At level 1, if you hit a 5, you're probably going to drop a goblin or something like that, which is probably what you're normally facing. It's a great way to maximize your damage and to help compensate for a lot of the things that clerics kind of get forced into, which I've talked about a lot, but like supporting roles and things like that. This gives you an ability to kind of keep yourself in the offensive field. At second level, when you gain access to Channel Divinity, you also gain the Death Domain Channel Divinity, Touch of Death. It reads, you can use your Channel Divinity to destroy another creature's life force by touch. When you hit a creature with a melee attack, you can use Channel Divinity to deal extra necrotic damage to the target. The damage equals 5 plus twice your cleric level. It's really straightforward. You can use Channel Divinity just to hit someone and add. At this point, you'll be hitting for an additional 9 damage. And that's pretty good at level 2, on top of whatever you hit normally. It's important to understand why you gain access to martial weapons, because now you have access to things like glaives, where you have that reach. This will constitute as a melee attack, and with that reach you can stay somewhat safe, because again, you do not have heavy armor. You are wearing medium armor, so it is pliable for you to be somewhat in the mix, but it gives you that nice buffer and it keeps you at a safe distance. Extra damage is great. Depending on what you're fighting and how you are, it's good because it's necrotic damage, and if you're fighting undead, you have the ability to turn undead anyway. And if you're not fighting undead, necrotic damage is a very useful damage type. So you have that great viability no matter how you use your Channel Divinity, and you're not locked into doing one thing or only saving it for that rare occasion that you never get to use. It's just flat out extra damage when you want it. Big bads are beating up your party. It does not look well. You need to crunk out some extra damage. At 10th level, that's 25 damage. Just from hitting, not counting whatever your modifiers are. So keep that in mind. It is an option, and if you're in a situation where necrotic damage is not viable, Turn Undead probably is. At 6th level, you gain access to Inescapable Destruction. This reads, your ability to channel negative energy becomes more potent. Necrotic damage dealt by your cleric spells and Channel Divinity options ignore resistance to necrotic damage. Understand you have access to Spirit Shroud, so if you do continue to attack, you will get extra necrotic damage on top of it per hit, and it will not be resisted. It helps buffer a lot of the scenarios and really enforces this great play with being able to fight undead and not fight everything else, switching off your Channel Divinity for bonuses like Turn Undead, which is wildly strong, and the ability to use necrotic on anything else that's living. Anything that has resistance might be any form of other entities that you might be fighting, but you ignore that at level 6. That is really early to have that ability. You will gain access to other spells that do various forms of damage that you can choose, or use necrotic damage flat out. That's beneficial to you. It's a great way to increase your damage. It feels well, and on top of that, it's boosting anything else that you might have already had that you were hesitant to use in scenarios that you didn't. It's really just a great way to make it either you're vulnerable to necrotic damage or you're going to get hit with everything I have. And it forces this great darkness to this character, because anything that uses necromancy in an offensive manner to destroy things is really just draining the life force. You're watching things wilt, like you're walking down a path and the trees and the grass all die around you. Like, that's the kind of energy you give off when you're doing things and when you're at the level where you have inescapable destruction. Like, it's almost profoundly like beautiful that you're starting to don the mask of death. Like, you're starting to become that, and it's almost fearful what you can do with it. At 8th level, you gain access to Divine Strike. You infuse your weapon strikes with necrotic energy. Once on each of your turns when you hit with a melee attack, you can cause the attack to do an additional 1d8 damage to the target. When you reach 14th level, the extra damage increases to 2d8. There's a little bit to unpack here, because it does not work with Inescapable Destruction, the ability you learned at level 6. It is not a spell. It is not a Channel Divinity. You might talk to your DM and maybe they might grant it to you. It might work depending on who they are. If you're using something like a glaive, you're doing 1d10 plus maybe say 4 plus 1d8, which is a pretty decent amount of damage. Again, everyone else has been hitting twice per turn. Your cantrips are doing a lot of damage at this point to compensate for not being able to done multiple times. What's important once you get this ability is to understand who your character really is. Or when you're building your character and you know you're going to get past this level, who is your character? Is your character the character wearing the dark cloth, carrying the glaive, and like slashing through enemies and having like their bodies decay from the wound? Or are you the guy standing in the back raising your holy symbol and making your enemies hear the tolls of the dead? That concept of what your character is when you're creating them and incorporating this into it is really going to bring your character full force. Because you have this ability and it's great, but if you never use it, it's really not worth it to even consider or really worry about. But if you're going to try and build a class and keep it to that class and really embody what that subclass does for that class and pull it all together, there is this great opportunity to be like a melee kind of fighter cleric, because you can do things like this. Like you can fight this way and get into the melee and do a couple of things here and there and feel competent about it. Depending on how you want to build your character, you could pick up something like Polearm Master, so you get a bonus attack at the end, or you could be using divine spiritual weapon, so you get that bonus action anyway. Like who your character is going to be almost defined by how you use this ability or how you don't, because at 8th level all shorter campaigns are ending if you've made it this far, and on campaigns that usually last to about 12 level, like you're almost there, and this is going to define that last big stretch, and it's important to incorporate that when making your character. At 17th level, you gain access to Improved Reaper. When you cast a necromancy spell of 1st through 5th level that targets only one creature, the spell can instead target 2 creatures within the same range and within 5 feet of each other. If the spell consumes material components, you must provide them for each target. Again, this is when you cast a necromancy spell. You have access to practically all of them. What I love about this is this idea that you're like almost like a dark Captain America, where you're just like standing there with a shield in one hand and you're just reaching out and you're just draining the life by casting level 5 vampiric touch on 2 people and just watching them wither away as you just regain HP in this beautiful thematic moment. I think it's awesome. I think it's so cool. On top of that, you ignore resistance to necrotic damage. It's a very cool ability. It's doubling the effects of your spell slots. It makes them significantly more important. You can do this on inflict wounds, which is like a 3d10 at level 1, and bump that up and hit someone really hard. And it's great because it hits 2 people. That's a lot of damage to dish out for 1 spell slot. It also gives you the availability to hit multiple people, because sometimes you roll and you miss. Depending on how your DM might roll this, you might just make 1 roll and that works. That's kind of how I see it. But you might be targeting 2 creatures that don't have the same armor class. So you might just miss 1, but you might not waste a spell slot because you got the other one. It's a great way to get a lot of mileage out of your spell slots. It's a cool ability. It is constantly on. So don't feel too worried about casting some of these bigger spells or upcasting some of these lower spells. At 17th level, your 1st level spells aren't really doing much for you. But keeping them learned and keeping them around might be very beneficial for you. Again, you're a spell casting class primarily by the books. Having some of these to give yourself that option is fantastic. It can give you longevity through vampiric touch. It can give you a great way just to put out debuffs on some of your enemies. It's a cool way to incorporate that and really show that like necromantic magic is yours. You have this ownership of it that you get to do like so much more than anyone else who casts that kind of magic can do. Talk to your DM about some of the limits, because raise undead and raise the dead or animate dead are all very important to understand that I mean, yeah, it says you can only target one creature, but is a creature when it's just the corpse? You know, like there's a little bit of a gray area there you might want to iron out, but I think it's a great way to bring something to go a little further, to really have a use for those lower level spell slots at a higher level. Our final thoughts. The cleric as a whole is so powerful. The spells that they gain access to are incredibly useful. Again, you get tied down to being this healer, this supporter kind of a character, but if you're already in a party where someone's going to be playing a healer, I mean, yeah, maybe it's good to just take some of the weight off their shoulders and cast some of these healing spells and help out when it's needed. I get it. But understand that you then get the ability to play this kind of a cleric where you can take the offensive spells and you can do great things and you can run into the mix. You can cast things like Spirit Guardians and Spirit Shrouds, so everything around you is terrified of you. And you get this awesome feeling from it. Yeah, you want to be able to do things. You can use melee weapons. Maybe you work something out where you get to weapon fighting or something and you use your bonus action to do that, or maybe you roll for stats and you rolled really, really well. Again, you got medium armor, so and 2 in dexterity is not a bad thing to have. Putting those things together and really working on the concept of what your character is going to be a great benefit, because you can really plan this out to be so well. Like that evil cloaked figure carrying the pole arm, like carrying that great halberd, like, and really being this imposing force, or just taking advantage of like attaching the holy symbol to your shield and just standing there like the Dark Captain America and just raining this necrotic world onto this unsuspecting enemies, and just, it's there. Like the story is so easy to be told. Like you can be good. You can do things like spare the dying and save 2 people at the same time. You can do things like you know, all the other healing things. Some of them fall under necromancy, so you can do some of those things in greater capacity than others. You're also a spiritual figure, so there is power in that. Maybe there's other organizations, maybe there's other death deities that are being worshipped, and you're here to change all that. Like, it's so easy to take this perfectly dark concept of a character and take them in any direction you want. Maybe you're just a pilgrim. Maybe you're just trying to spread the beliefs of your God into the world, and you're just traveling from place to place, showing them what the capacity is for someone who's devout, and you're doing it in this vile kind of like poisonous kind of a way, and it's cool. Like it feels good. Like it gets me excited, and it's this wonderful play on being a cleric and being the complete opposite of it. Maybe you're playing a game with another cleric in there, and you're a life cleric, and you're just caught in this like perfect chess match of morals and you know, party stress, and figuring out what do you do when you're right and they're wrong. Like how that all works and how that affects things. It's beautiful, and it gives you this great way to do it. And you can do it where you're not just evil. You can do this as death is just a fact of life. And you kind of work really well with grave domain clerics, because you kind of both share that like understanding of life, and it has to come to an end at some point. Even deities die when they don't get divine energy from worshippers and things like that. And it's a great way to kind of just bring the world forward by preventing it from hinging on things like immortality and consistent life, and focusing on that. And you can work that really well, and it works on so many levels to be just intricate. And you're wise because your wisdom score is high, so you gain a lot of the cool things like great perception and great insight into other people, and you can really use that to kind of figure out who they are and how to best turn them to your side, or how best to bring what you are into the world, into the forefront, as this incredibly dangerous dark figure. It's a great way to be this dark guardian, or this dark right hand, this dark advisor to a party, and bring them like this wonderful notion of what reality is of the circumstances. I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I think it's a lot of fun. It's cool. It gets you to use all these great spells that no one ever really gets to use. It enforces being able to do things a little bit differently and thinking outside of the box a little on how you handle combat, because you have so many options. With all of that being said, this class is awesome. The subclass is fantastic. I can't say enough about how cool it is to be a Death Domain Cleric. Just having the title is enough to bring me joy. That being said, we're going to bring this video to a close. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. Please, again, like, share, subscribe. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing that when you guys subscribe and share and talk to us, we love it. Thank you. Please keep doing it, and thank you for giving a Spooky Kid a chance.